I don't know whether to mash these potatoes, French fry them, lyonnaise them, or hash brown them.
Try stashing them. We are celebrating.
Wonderful. What are we celebrating?
Some shows leave a mark, not just on television, on the actual memory of a generation. A blinking genie, a pink harem costume, a bottle on a shelf in Cocoa Beach. If any of that just played in your mind like a film reel, you know exactly what this video is about. So let's look back at the people who made it unforgettable. This is I Dream of Jeannie, 1965. Cast, then and now, 2026. The show. Before we get to the cast, it's worth taking a moment with the show itself, because I Dream of Jeannie is a stranger and more interesting piece of television history than people sometimes remember. The series was created by Sidney Sheldon, who went on to become one of the best-selling novelists in the world, and it premiered on NBC on September 18, 1965. The premise was deceptively simple. Air Force Captain Tony Nelson, returning from a solo space mission, makes an emergency landing on a deserted island in the South Pacific. On the beach, he notices a strange bottle. He opens it. Out comes Jeannie, a 2,000-year-old genie who immediately pledges her devotion to her new master. Tony brings her home to Cocoa Beach, Florida, where the show is set, and the entire premise of every episode from that point on is essentially the same. Jeannie tries to help, things go sideways, and everyone scrambles to keep the US Air Force from finding out that an astronaut is living with a supernatural being who blinks things in and out of existence. The show ran for 5 seasons and 139 episodes, finishing its original run on May 26, 1970. The first season was shot in black and white. Starting with season 2, it switched to color, and that was when the iconic purple bottle replaced the original dark green one from the pilot. One of the most famous behind-the-scenes details about the show involves a small piece of fabric that was never shown on screen. NBC's broadcast standards at the time required that Barbara Eden's navel be hidden in every episode. The costume team had to engineer each outfit she wore, including the famous pink harem ensemble, so that it never exposed her midriff. The irony was that the costume revealed quite a lot while technically hiding everything the network required. It became one of the most talked about outfits in television history. The show also aired during the height of the American space program. NASA was conducting its Gemini missions during the show's first 2 seasons, and the Apollo program was already underway by the time it ended. The timing was not accidental. Space was the most exciting frontier in American life, and placing an astronaut at the center of a fantasy comedy gave the show an aspirational quality that connected with audiences everywhere. The show also sits in an interesting cultural context when you consider its relationship to Bewitched, which premiered on ABC a full week before Jeannie, on September 17, 1965. The 2 shows ran simultaneously for years, and the comparison was relentless. Both featured a supernatural female protagonist in a domestic setting, both played the comedy of a man trying to keep magic hidden from the outside world, and both starred remarkable actresses who could have walked through either role in their sleep. The casts and crews of both shows were aware of each other and publicly cordial. The audiences picked sides. The show also sits in an interesting cultural context when you consider its relationship to Bewitched, which premiered on ABC a full week before Jeannie.
Jeannie Sweetums, listen to me. We have a mess on our hands. Our darling master needs our help.
On September 17, 1965. The 2 shows ran simultaneously for years, and the comparison was relentless. Both featured a supernatural female protagonist in a domestic setting, both played the comedy of a man trying to keep magic hidden from the outside world, and both starred remarkable actresses who could have walked through either role in their sleep. The casts and crews of both shows were aware of each other and publicly cordial. The audiences picked sides. What distinguished Jeannie from Bewitched, beyond the surface differences, was the power dynamic at its center. Jeannie was not a witch living a human life by choice. She was a 2,000-year-old genie who had been sealed in a bottle for centuries and was now, voluntarily, pledging her service to an Air Force astronaut who found her on a beach. The show kept playing with the tension of that arrangement. Jeannie's enormous power, Tony's desperate attempts to keep a lid on it, and the question of who was really in charge. The answer, most of the time, was clearly Jeannie. She simply let Tony believe otherwise. One other thing worth noting about the show before we get to the people who made it. I Dream of Jeannie ended not because of ratings failure, but because the producers and the network felt they had nowhere left to take the story after Tony and Jeannie finally married in December 1969. The wedding episode aired, the show ran out a few more months, and then it ended. In television terms, that's an unusual way to go. Not canceled, not quietly abandoned, but concluded by the logic of its own premise. Now, the people who brought it all to life. Barbara Eden, Jeannie. When I Dream of Jeannie began production in 1965, Barbara Eden was 33 years old. She had already appeared in films, including a role alongside Elvis Presley in Flaming Star in 1960, and she had been a semi-regular on How to Marry a Millionaire in the late 1950s, but nothing in her earlier work came close to preparing either her or anyone else for what the role of Jeannie would mean. She was born Barbara Jean Moorhead on August 23, 1931, in Tucson, Arizona. She grew up in San Francisco, where she studied singing and acting. She was originally far more focused on becoming a singer than an actress. Her mother gently steered her toward acting, and she began taking classes. By her early 20s, she had moved to Los Angeles, and the combination of her looks, her natural warmth, and a performing ability that made difficult things look effortless began opening doors. She was cast by series creator Sidney Sheldon after he saw her in the 1964 fantasy comedy The Brass Bottle, a film in which she had played opposite a comedic Jeannie character herself. Something in how she handled that material, the timing, the grounded humanity, the ability to make something impossible feel entirely believable, convinced Sheldon she was the only person who could carry the show. What most people watching in 1965 didn't know was that Eden was pregnant when the series was greenlit. She was terrified of losing the role. The producers worked with her, positioning her carefully on camera and using creative framing for the first 13 episodes until her son, Matthew Ansara, was born on August 29, 1965, the same year the show premiered. She called him her Lucky Charm baby. The same day the pilot sold, her doctor had confirmed the pregnancy, and she had been certain the news would cost her the part. It didn't. One detail about the costume that almost nobody remembers correctly: the famous pink harem outfit was not the costume used in the original pilot. The first season was shot in black and white, and the costume in those early episodes was a different, simpler design. The full version of the outfit, the one the world remembers, arrived with the color seasons. The naval restriction from NBC's Standards and Practices division was in place throughout. Her personal life during and after the show held as much drama as anything Jeannie ever conjured. Eden and her first husband, actor Michael Ansara, whom she had married in 1958 after a blind date arranged by her publicist, divorced in 1974 after 16 years. She suffered a stillbirth in 1971, losing a child she had carried for nearly 8 months. She later described that loss as pushing her into a long and severe depression that contributed to the breakdown of her marriage. A second marriage, to producer Charles Fagert in 1977, lasted until 1982. In 1991, she married architect John Eicholtz, and that marriage has endured into her 90s. The deepest loss of her life came on June 25, 2001, when her son Matthew died from an accidental drug overdose at the age of 35. He had been struggling with addiction for years. He was nearly 2 years sober when it happened, planning his wedding for September 1st of that year, with the date already set and the invitations prepared. Eden has spoken openly about the loss in the years since, saying there is nothing worse a parent can experience, and that she still carries it with her every day. She has channeled that grief partly into speaking with other parents who are going through the same thing, urging them not to feel alone or ashamed. After Jeannie ended, her career continued steadily across several decades. She starred in the 1978 film Harper Valley PTA and the television series that followed it. She appeared in Stone Street, Who Killed the Centerfold Model, in 1977, co-starred with Larry Hagman again in the drama A Howling in the Woods, and made guest appearances across dozens of television productions. She reprised Jeannie twice in the reunion TV movies I Dream of Jeannie, 15 years later in 1985, and I Still Dream of Jeannie in 1991. She received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in November 1988. In 2011, she published her autobiography, Jeannie Out of the Bottle, which became a bestseller. A children's book, Barbara and the Djinn, followed in 2021. Her last acting role to date was a small part in the 2019 film My Adventures with Santa. She retired from acting shortly afterward, and has said she is at peace with that decision. As of 2026, Barbara Eden is 94 years old. She was photographed on her birthday last August 23rd in Sherman Oaks, California, heading to her local salon, and she was driving herself. She still attends conventions, travels with her husband, does charity work, and just a few weeks ago, in February 2026, she shared a video on social media recreating what the inside of Jeannie's bottle would have looked like. Thrilling fans 60 years after the show first aired. She donated her handheld prop bottle from the series to the Smithsonian Institution. It belongs to history now, so does she. Larry Hagman, Captain/Major Tony Nelson. Larry Hagman was born on September 21, 1931, in Fort Worth, Texas, just 1 month after Barbara Eden, as it turned out. His mother was the legendary Broadway actress Mary Martin, famous for starring in South Pacific and Peter Pan. His father was a district attorney. His parents divorced when he was 5 years old, and Hagman spent much of his childhood with his maternal grandmother in Weatherford, Texas. When his grandmother died in 1944, he moved back with his mother, who by then had remarried and launched a major Broadway career. It was an unusual childhood, a lot of moving around, a lot of time spent watching a parent perform at the highest level of their craft, a lot of figuring out who he was in the shadow of someone famous. He studied briefly at Bard College in New York before dropping out to pursue acting, apprenticing at Margot Jones's theater company in Dallas, and then working his way through New York productions. In 1951, he joined his mother in London for the West End production of South Pacific, and was a member of that cast for nearly a year. In 1952, he was drafted into the United States Air Force and spent 4 years stationed in London, spending much of that time entertaining U.S. troops throughout Europe. It was in London that he met Maj Axelsson, the Swedish woman he would marry in 1954 and remain with until his death 58 years later. After leaving the Air Force in 1956, he returned to New York for stage work, eventually moving to Hollywood and transitioning into television with guest roles through the early 1960s. He appeared in 2 films in 1964, Ensign Pulver and the Cold War thriller Fail Safe with Henry Fonda. He was cast as Tony Nelson in 1965 and brought to the role an energy that was fundamentally different from what anyone expected. He played a serious astronaut with the slightly glazed expression of a man who has accepted, on a molecular level, that his life will never be fully under his control again. It was a comic performance of real precision, dressed up as something straightforward. He also directed 3 episodes of the series during its run, evidence of an ambition that went beyond simply showing up and hitting his marks. In the years after Jeannie ended, Hagman appeared in a string of projects before landing a role that would define his second act. When Dallas premiered on CBS in 1978, Hagman played J.R. Ewing, an oil baron, a schemer, a liar of epic proportions, a man who made betrayal look like a character strength. The performance was extraordinary. He wasn't just playing a villain, he was playing a villain who knew exactly what he was, who enjoyed it, and who somehow made you enjoy it with him. The show ran for 13 seasons and 357 episodes, and Hagman appeared in every single one. He was the only actor to do so. The cultural peak of JR's reign came in 1980, with the season 3 cliffhanger in which the character was shot by an unknown assailant. The episode ended in March 1980, and the identity of the shooter was not revealed until November, generating 8 months of worldwide speculation. When the answer finally aired, the episode drew a then record rating of 53.3, making it one of the most watched broadcasts in American television history. The moment had a life beyond television. It became a cultural shorthand for the kind of suspense that reaches outside entertainment and into something more like collective obsession. His health became a serious concern over the years. He had been a heavy drinker for much of his adult life, by some accounts consuming 4 bottles bottles of champagne a day during the Dallas years, and was diagnosed with cirrhosis in 1992. In August 1995, he underwent a life-saving liver transplant. The experience shook him profoundly. He quit drinking, stopped smoking, gave up meat, and became an active advocate for green energy and organ donation. He served as chairman of the American Cancer Society's Great American Smokeout for many years and used his public platform aggressively to discourage smoking. In 2011, while filming the TNT continuation of Dallas, he was diagnosed with throat cancer and began treatment while continuing to work. By June 2012, that cancer was reportedly in remission. Then, in July 2012, doctors diagnosed him with a blood condition that developed into acute myeloid leukemia. He pushed through and completed 10 episodes of the revival season. He died on November 23, 2012, at Medical City Dallas Hospital, surrounded by family who had come to Dallas for Thanksgiving. He was 81 years old. His ashes were scattered at South Fork Ranch in Parker, Texas, the fictional home of the Ewings. He had been married to Major Axelson since 1954. They had 2 children and 5 grandchildren. The marriage lasted until his death, just a month shy of their 59th wedding anniversary. Barbara Eden's tribute to him was simple and precise. She said he was one of the most intelligent actors she ever worked with, and that when you work alongside someone like that, you know immediately when the ball is being tossed back with real intention. Bill Daly, Major Roger Healy. If Larry Hagman was the panicked straight man and Barbara Eden was the magical heart of the show, Bill Daly was something else entirely. He was the best friend, the sidekick, the man who accidentally summoned Jeannie himself in at least one episode and briefly became her new master. He was also, by the account of virtually everyone who worked with him, one of the warmest and most naturally funny human beings who ever wandered onto a television set. Bill Daly was born William Edward Daly on August 30th, 1927 in Des Moines, Iowa. His father walked out when he was an infant, went out for a loaf of bread, his son would later say with a comedian's timing, and never came back. He was raised by his mother in Chicago, where he attended Lane Technical High School and spent his teenage years playing upright bass in jazz bands across the Midwest. He was genuinely good at it. He toured the club circuit, worked in small rooms, and for a while it seemed like music would be the thing. In the early 1950s, he was drafted into the United States Army and served during the Korean War, first with an artillery unit and later with an entertainment company. After the war, he transitioned into stand-up comedy and worked his way through the Chicago club circuit with increasing success. He became a floor director and eventually a staff director at WMAQ, the NBC affiliate in Chicago. It was through that work that he crossed paths with a young accountant who was moonlighting in comedy clubs. That accountant was Bob Newhart. Daly helped Newhart develop a comedic piece about Abraham Lincoln being handled by a press agent, got him airtime on a local broadcast, and watched Newhart's career launch from that moment. The two men would be professionally connected for the rest of their lives. Daly came to I Dream of Jeannie sideways, in the way things often happen in Hollywood, through a last-minute shift of plans. He had been cast in a different sitcom, My Mother the Car, when the project was reshuffled, and he found himself instead being offered the role of Roger Healy by Sidney Sheldon, who had noticed him in a guest appearance on Bewitched. Daly later admitted he didn't even know which show he was being put on. He showed up and found out on the day. What he brought to Roger Healy, the only person at Cocoa Beach besides Tony who knew Jeannie was real, was something irreplaceable. He played Healy not as someone frightened by the supernatural, but as someone utterly delighted by it. While Tony spent every episode trying to minimize the damage, Healy was quietly trying to get more magic, not less. Daly gave the character a loosey-goosey physical quality that was entirely his own invention. A particular loping walk, a rubber-faced double take at anything impossible, a goofy grin that could flip in an instant to wide-eyed alarm. He was asked once where the walk came from. He genuinely didn't know. That was his walk. He battled dyslexia throughout his entire career. Scripts were difficult, so he memorized every word he ever performed, in every episode, for every season. Over 5 seasons and 131 episodes across 2 separate long-running series, he never missed a beat in front of the camera, even though reading the dialogue off the page was something he couldn't reliably do. After Jeannie ended, Newhart came looking for his old friend. The Bob Newhart Show premiered on CBS in 1972, and Daly joined the cast as Howard Borden, a divorced commercial airline pilot who lived across the hall from Bob Hartley and perpetually wandered into the Hartleys' apartment unannounced. He was the show's secret weapon in a cast full of extraordinary performers. Bob Newhart later described him as the production's bullpen man. Whenever a script needed rescuing, they put Bill in the scene. The character was loosely compared in later years to Kramer from Seinfeld, the neighbor who arrives uninvited and fills the room with chaos. Daly did it first and more warmly. He played Howard Borden for 6 seasons and 140 episodes. He appeared in both Jeannie reunion movies. He returned for a Newhart anniversary special. He gradually stepped back from acting in the late 1990s, eventually moving to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where he lived in a high-rise apartment overlooking the Sandia Mountains and, according to his son, never got tired of pointing at that view and saying how gorgeous it was. Bill Daly died of natural causes on September 4, 2018, at his son's home in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He was 91 years old. Barbara Eden posted a tribute to him the same day, calling him a funny and sweet man who kept everyone on their toes and saying she was grateful to have known and worked with that rascal. Hayden Rorke, Dr. Alfred Bellows. If there was a single character on I Dream of Jeannie whose function was to represent the limits of rational thinking in an irrational world, it was Dr. Alfred Bellows, the NASA psychiatrist whose entire professional existence was spent trying to explain why Tony Nelson kept behaving so peculiarly, never once arriving at the correct explanation, which was standing right in front of him in pink silk harem pants. Week after week, episode after episode, the same thing. Something impossible had clearly just happened. Dr. Bellows had clearly witnessed some part of it, and the reasonable, clinical, educated explanation he had for it was completely wrong. The world never ran out of ways to make him look foolish. He never ran out of dignity. Hayden Rorke was born William Henry Rorke on October 23, 1910, in Brooklyn, New York. He was the son of a stage actress named Margaret Hayden Rorke, from whose maiden name he took his professional stage name. He trained at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, graduating in 1932, and began his stage career with the Hampton Theatrical Company. Over the following 3 decades, he appeared in more than 70 Broadway productions, a number that puts him among the most experienced stage actors in the country by any measure. His film career ran alongside his stage work from the late 1940s onward. He appeared in An American in Paris in 1951, the Oscar-winning Gene Kelly musical. He was in Pillow Talk in 1959, the hit Doris Day and Rock Hudson comedy. He appeared in Disney's The Monkey's Uncle in 1965, just as Jeannie was getting underway. He had been a recognizable television presence for years, with guest roles on Perry Mason, The Twilight Zone, I Love Lucy, and the Beverly Hillbillies. He had appeared on The Twilight Zone in 1961, in an episode called A Penny for Your Thoughts. He had appeared opposite Doris Day and James Garner in The Thrill of It All in 1963. He was a versatile, thoroughly experienced character actor, someone who knew exactly what he was doing in every frame. Dr. Bellows was his only regular television series role outside a brief stint on Mr. Adams and Eve in 1957. He played the character in 129 episodes across all 5 seasons, always a beat behind the truth, always absolutely convinced that the problem was Tony Nelson, and never the genie Tony kept in a bottle on his shelf. The comedy of the character worked precisely because Rorke played it completely straight. Dr. Bellows was not in on the joke. He was a serious man doing a serious job, and the world around him simply refused to cooperate. Rorke understood that the more earnestly he played the exasperation and the professional certainty, the funnier it became. If he had allowed even a flicker of self-awareness, the whole construction would have collapsed. After Jeannie ended in 1970, typecasting followed as it did virtually every regular cast member. He made guest appearances on Cannon and The Love Boat, appeared in the television miniseries The Money Changers in 1976, and did live stage work in Florida and Missouri in the early 1980s. His final screen appearance was reprising Dr. Bellows in the reunion TV movie I Dream of Jeannie, 15 years later in 1985, 20 years after he had first stepped into the role. Hayden Rorke died on August 19, 1987, at his his home in Toluca Lake, California. He was 76. The cause was multiple myeloma. He was buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City. He had lived with his partner, Eustace Addis, for 40 years. The two had met in 1953 on a film project and remained together through decades of Hollywood, through the show's entire run, through the years that followed. Barbara Eden wrote about him with real warmth in her autobiography, describing him as a man who was completely and unashamedly himself at a time in American life when that was not easy or safe, and who carried himself through it with grace. Barton MacLane, General Martin Peterson. Behind Dr. Bellows stood another authority figure doing his best to make sense of a world that Jeannie kept reorganizing without permission. General Martin Peterson was Tony Nelson's commanding officer, blunt, no nonsense, perpetually on the edge of concluding that his best astronaut had lost his mind and that nobody around him seemed particularly concerned about it. Barton MacLane was one of the most prolific character actors in Hollywood history. He was born on Christmas Day, 1902, in Columbia, South Carolina, the son of the superintendent of a local mental hospital, a biographical detail that adds a certain irony to his eventual role as the superior of a man whose psychiatrist spent 5 years convinced was losing his grip on sanity. He attended Wesleyan University in Connecticut on the strength of his abilities as a football player and later trained at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. He made his Broadway debut in 1927 and was appearing in films by the late 1920s, landing his first credited screen role in 1931. By the 1930s and 1940s, he was one of Warner Brothers' most reliable heavies. He was a large man, broad-shouldered, hard-faced, with a voice like gravel being moved around in a metal container. He was menacing in a way that read immediately on screen without effort. As a result, he spent years playing gangsters, outlaws, corrupt lawmen, and intimidating authority figures of all stripes. He appeared in The Maltese Falcon in 1941 opposite Humphrey Bogart, playing a detective who doesn't trust Sam Spade and lets him know it physically. He and Bogart appeared together again in The Treasure of the Sierra Madre in 1948, one of the most celebrated films of that decade. He appeared in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with Spencer Tracy in 1941, in The Glenn Miller Story with James Stewart in 1954, and in well over 125 other films throughout his career. He also appeared in the Marx Brothers film The Coconuts in 1929, making him a presence in Hollywood across multiple eras and genres. He was a playwright and screenwriter as well, and accomplished enough as a musician that he could play the violin, the piano, and the guitar. When he joined I Dream of Jeannie in 1965 as General Peterson, he was 62 years old and had spent more than 3 decades building one of the most recognizable faces in American film and television. He appeared in 35 episodes across the show's first 4 seasons, bringing the same rugged, unyielding authority to the role that he had spent a career perfecting in far darker material. He died on January 1st, 1969, at St. John's Health Center in Santa Monica, California, from double pneumonia. He had been admitted to the hospital 2 weeks earlier, just after filming an episode of the show. He was 66 years old. 3 of his I Dream of Jeannie episodes aired after his death. His character, General Peterson, was replaced by General Winfield Schaefer, played by Vinton Hayworth, who also died before all of his own episodes had broadcast. MacLane was buried at Valhalla Memorial Park Cemetery in North Hollywood. MacLane's star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame stands at 6,719 Hollywood Boulevard, a marker for a career that stretched from the silent era through the space age and encompassed some of the most celebrated films ever made. Where they stand today, 2026. In 2026, 60 years after I Dream of Jeannie first aired on NBC, what remains of that principal cast is a single thread, and it is a remarkable one. Barbara Eden, at 94, is the last surviving member of the regular cast. She is retired from acting, with her last role being a small part in the 2019 film My Adventures with Santa. But retired from acting does not mean retired from life. She still attends fan conventions around the country. She travels internationally. She does charity work. She was in Spain not long ago for a charity event supporting senior citizens. On August 23, 2025, her 94th birthday, she was photographed leaving a salon in Sherman Oaks, California, wearing heeled sandals and a floral maxi skirt, carrying a package, and walking steadily on her own. She had driven herself there. In February 2026, she shared a video on social media showing a recreation of what the interior of Jeannie's bottle set looked like. and the fan response was immediate and enormous. Comments flooded in from people who had watched the show as children in the 1960s and from people discovering it for the first time. Some mentioned wanting that bedroom since childhood. Some said they still didn't realize how large the bottle set actually was. The show's 60th anniversary was marked in September 2025, and the conversation about it has not quieted since. She donated her handheld prop bottle to the Smithsonian Institution years ago. In an interview around the anniversary, she recalled that there had actually been several different bottle sets used over the course of the series, all of them enormous. The one the world holds in its imagination, that glowing purple bottle on Tony's shelf, is an object that belongs to American cultural memory now. So does the woman who climbed out of it. Larry Hagman left us on November 23, 2012. He was 81. His Tony Nelson was the grounded center of the show's comedy, and his J.R. Ewing was one of the defining performances in the history of American television drama. Those two characters, separated by 13 years and every possible tonal difference, together represent a career of unusual breadth and staying power. His ashes rest at South Fork Ranch in Parker, Texas. Bill Daly left us on September 4, 2018. He was 91. His Roger Healy was the show's secret weapon, the character who made the magic feel like fun instead of threat, who brought pure delight to every scene he shared with Eden and Hagman. Bob Newhart, who knew him for 60 years and worked with him across 2 long-running series, said in his tribute that he would miss him dearly and that he was one of the most positive people he had ever known. That is the kind of testament that means something. Hayden Rorke left us in August 1987 at 76. Barton MacLane left in January 1969 at 66, while the show was still in production. Between them, across 5 very different careers and very different chapters of American entertainment history, these 5 people assembled something on a Burbank soundstage starting in 1965 that has now outlasted almost everything around it. The show was built on a simple, slightly absurd premise and powered by performances that were anything but. Every week for 5 seasons, those performers showed up and made it feel real enough to laugh at, warm enough to care about, and good enough to remember. 60 years later, it is still being watched, still being discovered, still doing exactly what it was always meant to do. That is the answer to where they are now. The people are gone, most of them. The work is still here, and for anyone who grew up with it, the pink costume, the blink, the purple bottle on the shelf, it probably always will be. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on more fascinating stories.